Hello, welcome back to the podcast about the book The Single Zombie Apocalypse Complete Guide to the World of the Unmarried. My name is Barry Sines. I wrote this book, but I can't really say I wrote it because it came from a lot of conversations with a lot of people. So it's more of a just collection of many conversations with people so they can take credit to everybody I've talked to and just things I've observed over the over years basically during my you know, dating life and things like that. Just having these experiences with relationships, having relationships that are more strainful on my soul, and also I see other people having those same experiences, but even worse. So I haven't had it the worst. I was engaged once and had other relationships where we talked about marriage and stuff like that. And so I've experienced those things. I've just never gotten married and then divorced. So that's something that I haven't experienced. I have some family members who have experienced those things, and it is just very intense. And I feel those same emotions though, as I witnessed that happening. And but that during that time, I feel like there was something happening, especially when it hit close to home. There was something happening going on, and I during this whole time I'm like, why is it such a struggle for a lot of people? And it's increasing this and I kept collecting articles and writing down conversations and little things that people would say. I was like, oh, that's good, I need to write this down. So as soon as I wrote it down, I kept collecting a bunch of these notes and quotes and all these things, and and I never intended on writing a book. And then after a while, I wrote some small articles and I shared them with some people. But then I was like, wow, I have enough information. I'll just put it together. I just have to organize it, and then it's a book. So and I could publish on Amazon if I wanted to. So it I never really intentioned to it for it to be popular or for everybody to just love it and read it and identify with everything in there. I never thought that would happen. And but I just think that the people that I'm thinking about, people closest to me that have been struggling with that, I think they appreciate those things, and it kind of gives me a way to give to start a conversation or something if somebody is struggling with something. But not everybody identifies with everything in the book, and because everybody varies in their experiences, of course, and it's not something um, that it's impossible to write every experience in here. So, but I try to go over a lot of it in general. So that's why this book can turn into many different books. But the last podcast, I talked about the film industry, the music industry, the media in general, and how that influences our culture. And I wanted to start there because I was intimately involved with the media just because of my profession. And I knew how influential it was. And whenever I made a short film or something like that, I love the idea that people really soaked it in. Sometimes they laughed, cried, um, quoted the movie for years, and it was interesting to see those things. And then some people, you know, extrapolated meaning out of things I never intended on. And so one girl was like, "I loved how you used the shadows in your movie to communicate something." And I'm like, I don't remember thinking about the shadows at all. I only had one lamp to work with light, and I just kind of went with that. So I guess it created shadows. So there's little things like that, but I thought it was just interesting how that worked, and then I see it in the media all the time, out there in the film industry, the music industry. Like there's a great influence on sometimes intentional things in the films or music, and then unintentional things. So it's all mixed in there. But when you get a society that is influenced by a lack of standards or any kind of morals or values, and it degrades over time, the media reflects that, or it can influence the degrading of those things. So it's either way. It's either reflecting the bad morals, lack of standards, or it's promoting it. So, and I talk through the rest of the book about how that affects everything else in our life, and I would say narcissism is a big one, and I mentioned that one. Talk about that and how it's very potent. It's like a this poisonous attitude, and it encompasses a lot of things, just self centeredness, insecurity, thinking about uh, number one first, and a narcissistic person will uh, th- have opinions, but they'll hold it as if it's a standard, and they have a real struggle with working with and accepting other people's point of view, and there's a pride factor in there, and it's all these things kind of wrapped up in one, and that's why I liked the narcissism topic. Is that is everywhere. That's part of the celebrity culture, and I mentioned that in there too. It's just pretty much influenced everything in our life, and we could see it, and we could make those connections. Whether or not you could scientifically prove that media is influencing violence or all these things, but you could just see the connections. You could see that people who don't have morals anymore in their family growing up, then they may very well be influenced by the media that they see, and thinking that the solution is to act out whatever the media shows. And we get a barrage of many different instances of violence in media. Of course, sexuality is in there. I talk about that at length as well. But you can see those connections, and if you just scroll through Netflix or any kind of movie thing, and every cover, almost every other cover on movies is going to have some girl or guy with a gun in their hands, and they're it's very very much promoted. So and of course there's people who want to make money, and so they continue to make those movies, and the public consume it, and so that's why it keeps perpetuating itself. And the so I talk about the violence, and I talk about narcissism, and I talk about sexual revolution, and all those kind of things kind of mixed around in our culture, and we all can have those experiences or struggle with those experiences. Meaning, like, we some of us recognize there's a bit of narcissism inside of us, whether it's like self-centeredness or in any form, or some kind of insecurity with other people's opinions and dealing with it and stuff like that. So there's a very strong uh, people could feel a very strong uh, thing in whatever, a very strong influence or a very strong struggle in each of those things. So the sexual revolution, I wrote several pages on, and this is a sensitive topic because there's so many people. Every individual is going to have their individual opinion and stance on this very thing. But I wanted to talk about it because it has a very potent and powerful influence upon individuals, division of people, division of a culture, and division of relationships, causing intense chaos, all the way up to murder and or thinking about it or suicide or because there's just so much going on with the sexuality. It has a powerful effect on relationships, and there. So I just get into it, touching on several ideas, and it's pretty obvious. I mean, when I write it in there, you're like, yeah, I know that, I know it. But I put it in here because it is a huge influence, and I think this will take some personal revelation on the part that may have influenced you. Of course, I put in there sexual abuse, and both men and women experience that, and we hear a lot about the women when the when they get raped, or there's several rapes or a gang rape, or even it may not even be rape, but it's kind of a they feel that influence of just corrupt, no morals, not being treated with respect and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of different examples that just churn up the a lot of deep feelings with this stuff. And part of the sexual revolution was back in the 60s, leading up into the 80s and 90s, and still today. There's that sexual revolution that was very apparent that started back in the probably 50s and 60s. And that's when the media started getting more pronounced, or the technology was becoming more available to everybody. So you could start seeing an influence through the media, films and radio and magazines and all sorts of media. So this sexual revolution kind of gives a perfect place to start back in the 60s. And I think of the 60s just because, those are the images that I've seen, till today. You could still see, you know, all sorts of different issues that are still the same today. If you were to see the news, a news clip back in the 60s, it seems like it's the exact same thing today. It's like they are saying the same things, they are doing the same things. People feel the same way. It's all the same. And so now it's just kind of gotten so widespread that people born into this culture is they it's almost like we don't know what's different anymore. It's we're living in it, and we feel that it's just normal. We even fight for it, and many of us do. And it's very difficult to kind of sift through and figure out what's causing so many heartaches, so many different experiences with relationships and the chaos. And I wanted to think about the revolution as a kind of a way to look at it. So when you see it as an example in the 60s, and and now we have some time that has passed, and we could start looking at what has happened, some results, consequences, and are people actually happy that there was sexual liberation, quote unquote, type of thing. And what I'm going to suggest and talk about, I personally believe in the standards that God has given us. And there's a reason for that. And it's, he said, bridle your passions. And that encompasses sexuality, but also other passions. But what it does say is that we have passions. What it doesn't say is that passions are bad. Passions are God given, and the sexual drive is God given. But what the Lord is telling us is that He's telling us to bridle them, and it doesn't mean suppress. It means to bridle, to control, or put within bounds that he has set. And when he instructs that, he doesn't want to control people with commandments or standards. He wants to lead them to safety and to greater happiness. And some people haven't gone to the point of really trusting that God wants to lead you to greater happiness. And so, as soon as your faith in Him increases and gets to the point where you actually trust that God wants to lead you to greater happiness, then those commandments and standards, morals becomes a guideline. It becomes a thing to really embrace and value, so that you know that He is leading you to greater happiness within relationships, within your life, having a fulfilling life, actually finding fulfillment, and instead of searching for everything to try to satisfy your soul, your mind, your emotions, all of those things. And that could be in the form of just addiction and whatever it is. Pornography is thrown in there too, because it's a part of the sexual uh, thing, the sexual passion, uh, and that people use that for a coping mechanism, or kind of a replacement if they don't have the type of fulfillment they're looking for, or if they have lack of affection, or if they fear they won't have affection in the future, or if they may have been abused themselves in some relationship or in their childhood or something, and so it prevents them from finding a true healthy relationship that they could trust and have real intimacy and have it be fulfilling. And so there's a bunch of different things you could say about that. I'm just kind of talking in general terms, and so that's why it's going to come back to personal revelation for your own individual life. And a lot of times you have to dig down and figure out what happened in your childhood, what kind of upbringing did you have, and a lot of scriptural type of things of what the Lord, what He has said about that type of thing. So it's gonna have to be a pursuit of that type of personal revelation. And I am actually working on a book on this topic, and I'm gonna be taking excerpts out of my book and applying it into that. And I've been intimidated by that topic because I don't think I don't have a doctorate or anything in this topic, but just by observing and experiencing a lot of these things in my family and my extended family and my family history, and the struggles that I and my family, and I could see it in 3 or 4 generations in my past. And so as if I've inherited struggles, or you could call them family curses type of thing. So when you identify those things in your childhood or even beyond that, you have something to go off of, and you could look at a source. That's why I looking at the sexual revolution in the 60s, because that highly influenced our probably our grandparents and great grandparents, and you can kind of see a division or a destruction of family probably around that time. I remember both my great grandparents on both sides had a traditional good family life, and it wasn't until my grandparents on both sides, they both had a very destructive family experience. And so my parents, when they met, they had to find their faith and latch on to their faith in Jesus Christ. And they told me those experiences that they wanted to rebuild and piece together basically their lives together. And as I'm starting to understand that in my life, my family history, I'm able to figure out and not be so uh, discouraged about what I struggle with in my life. And so, whether it's, financially, or I haven't had the wisdom of dealing with money, and so I don't know what to invest in, and I've had to learn through the hard way of doing that. And then I didn't have money to start with, and so there was no inheritance, there was nothing like that. So those are I'm just kind of going off on that because we can discover some certain things that we inherited, so to speak, or things that we didn't inherit. And and I could talk about wisdom that we did not inherit. Some families do have a good family strong base, and they have children, and then those children's children have children, but they've had that wisdom, they've had those morals or values, or little bits of wisdom about life. And as you go forward, as you feel, go into adolescence, and you start feeling those the drive, the sexual drive, and the changes and the emotions and all of those things in your life, you start. And if you don't have that wisdom or those things to you don't have any contrast, or you don't have anything to reference. And so you could be very highly influenced by whatever the world is doing, and that's through the media and through uh, their ways of dealing with sexuality. I so that could be a very high influence. All of those things just are what we are born into, through our family. We may have this very similar family struggles that our grandparents had, great grandparents. So um, you could think of it that way. But all of these things can be overcome by the blood of Jesus Christ. And when I say the blood of Jesus Christ, I mean His power, Him, uh, His His love, His grace, as we look towards Him, accept Him, and continually try to uh, look to Him as the standard, and believe and have faith that He wants you to have greater happiness, and He will lead you in that direction. And if you're struggling with relationships, or if you're struggling with whatever kind of addiction, to try to fill your life with something that your spirit is looking for, and He will lead you to those things. He has a greater fulfillment that anything than anything that Satan can mimic, or Satan's trying to replace a lot of the things our soul is looking for with his own ideas, and with his own, physical gratifications in whatever way. And the Lord has a true and perfect way of finding that fulfillment in our life and being completely happy and satisfied. And that means all of our passions, all of everything that we desire. And if we learn and value those things, those standards, and the guidelines, or the, I would say, within His bounds that He has set, that we will find greater fulfillment and greater happiness that we've always wanted, and things that we have forgotten that we've wanted. And these things may have been lost and forgotten in our childhood, or and there'll be moments when you're seeking after those things that the Lord is guiding you. He will give you those little glimpses of in your spirit, of those reminders of, oh yeah, I remember feeling this, and wanting this. I want this so much, and it's been lost and forgotten, and I just didn't think it was possible. And I'm talking in general, but it can be very much e- connected to a desire for a relationship, one of those dream relationships that you've always wanted and you've just let go of because there's so much chaos in our relationships. And a lot of times, more, and I wrote this in my book too, a lot of times that people don't realize it is the sexual, not, is the sexual, uh, not having bridled that passion to the standards the Lord has set. And that is having an effect on our relationships and everything else. And a lot of people haven't attributed that, just that, into their relationships. People have a mindset of, well, maybe a sexual encounter can lead to a relationship that'll work. And what the Lord is saying is that we have a connection and a commitment first, and then the sexual passion is actually used for that relationship that is very good. And he specifically says within the bonds of marriage. And we could equate that to a fire in the wintertime. You Fire is very good to use, and with it becomes very useful and very comforting, satisfying. We have it warming us up during a very cold winter, and once it gets outside that bounds, it causes fear, chaos. It burns us, it hurts us, and we may have been playing with it because we're intrigued with fire, and so it just gets out of hand. And so the misuse of that fire, we call it passion, is can hurt us, and so that can go into other things too. But we can think about that in the sexual term. But that is a very good metaphor or symbolic thing of our sexual passion. So, and none of us, of course, today, none of us can be perfect because we're highly influenced by this, and it is a chaos, and it is a very much a tsunami or an ocean that is just within the culture, and it causes us to have these horrible experiences in our relationship, and it leads to division with our stances or whatever on it, our strong feelings about it, our fear of our it turns to fear of our sexuality. It causes our hearts to grow cold, and it massacres love. It massacres real love. It doesn't create it. So it's one of the things I talk about is this tsunami of images that plague us. I compared a the images of sexualized images, and that could be a man or a woman, could be a sexualized image of on television, TV shows, everything, or even music can give us a sexualized image. And I have examples of those. So when we're inundated with that in our culture, we're just constantly thinking our sexuality is used against us. So we have this um, constant emotion or influence. I would compare it to the sexual drive in men in general. Uh, that is triggered by an image. So if a man, I'm talking in general. So if a man or woman could be influenced by this, and I'm just saying that if you have a sexualized image that pops up, a scene in a movie or something, it has the tendency to influence your own sexual desire. And that's an obvious kind of very, you know, basic statement, but it's true. But if you think about it, the truth is we have so much of it around and we are just swimming in all of this stuff. So of course, nobody's going to be perfect and we're going to slip up. We're going to have bad thoughts, bad actions, wrong philosophies for a while about sexuality because we're so influenced by it. And I would say it's nearly impossible to overcome unless you've hit rock bottom and you don't you get to the point where you don't care about sexuality anymore. You just want peace in your soul. And I have had a couple examples of that I have found. I'll probably put it in my book if I write that, and if I publish that. I don't know. It might be good enough just in this book, but just to give people some ideas. But some people, after all of this sexual revolution, and after all these years that through generations people have experienced the horror that comes from the sexual chaos, kids being born out of wedlock, being born without parents, being being born just a single mother or a single father, someone abandoned them, or just some kind of thing happened. A stepson getting their you know having an encounter with her stepmother and having just and then a child coming from that. So there's a lot of different things that can happen that will cause so much hurt and so much chaos. So I want to emphasize the grace of Jesus Christ, and the reason why I want to emphasize that is because it's most needed right now. His atonement and his the ability for him to forgive and for us to be able to forgive others, and to he makes everything new. He makes our life new, our hearts, our minds, our bodies. He makes everything new. So our emotions are included in there, and as our faith increase in him, we could feel that grace, and we could feel of those things applying to our hearts. And if we reach that point where we're just where all these sexual drives and desires and temptations are not worth it. I feel like people have to get to that point to let go of having this sexual drive control everything that they do, and have a sexual drive be a be an identity, rather than that having dictate everything that they do in life and every thought they have. It's so uh, difficult to break away from that unless we've hit rock bottom and felt the hell and the horror that comes from the the chaos of all that stuff. And then the answer is Jesus Christ still wants you. He still loves you, and he is waiting for the opportunity for that sincere moment that you hit rock bottom and you're like, I am so sick of these relationships that don't go anywhere. They're the other person just wants to have sex. That's the only thing on their mind, and then they leave when things get hard, or it's so difficult because I have two or three or more kids from different men or different women. You've got it. Some people are trying to find where to go, and what I'm saying is Jesus Christ is the way to go, and he doesn't turn away anybody, and his grace is sufficient, and it's amazing. His especially in these latter days, he is most needed, and His grace is most needed for people who really want to reach out to Him. And once you hit that heartfelt, sincere, to the core of your soul prayer, then you will feel that beginning of that. And it may be a fight to try to change your life and make new friends and make new relationships. But that one relationship with Jesus Christ is the answer. And I write about that in the end of the book. So it's a very powerful thing. And that's why I emphasize that a lot with every topic that I say. Jesus Christ, His principles, His character, all of those things encompassed into the Christ. He provides that miraculous renewal of our life, of our mind, emotions, our spirit. He will make everything new. He doesn't just heal and leave us and there's a scar. There is a completely new flesh there, if you want to put it that way. So if your heart has been broken and tattered and torn, He doesn't just heal it, He makes it all new. So that that is His power. That's a representation of His power and of His grace. So I must emphasize that. So in our culture, we through the media and all sorts of different ways, there's a demeaning of women by sexualizing a woman's body, and this also can be applied to men as well. But this one's the most obvious topic. So the woman's body can be sexualized and demeaned, and we just are born into this culture where that is just a normal thing to do. And in fact, it is within the culture now to just within the comfort of your own home, you could be a, you know, strip in front of the camera and you've got, a job earning money. And it's not just women doing this. I can't say just one sex or the other. It is both men and women, all sorts of different situations. It becomes so easy to do that, but we're inundated with the those types of images that are around us, and there's so much more people producing it. So it's not just a producer who is taking pictures and putting it into a magazine and paying these women. It is now the internet, and both men and women, if they have access to a camera, they're producing it. And it's so it kind of leads us to think on differently and about what pornography or sexualized images are, and is you get all sorts of different avenues for people to produce it, and the great temptation to try to survive and to use that as an avenue and to earn money, which, you know, I must emphasize the grace of Jesus Christ is always available for those who want to find and be inspired to find different paths and to find His path, to find different ways of earning money and surviving and not having to do those type of things. But this is so strong. It's so powerful. It's everywhere, and it's very difficult to avoid. So I put in that the demeaning and sexualizing of a woman's body in there, and certainly women who want to keep standards and not fall into that category is very difficult. And if the men around them treat them as uh, with lack of respect, and they treat them with sex first, and so women who want to hold standards and who want to be respected don't have that in our culture. It becomes very hostile for them to live in, and so they have to protect themselves somehow if they want to try to keep their standards. They may have fallen into a bad relationship that was toxic, or they're just every day they feel that pressure to uh, do whatever sexually or reveal more things and have more, have less and less clothes on, stuff like that. So to get attention. So there's a lot of pressure there. And if all of her friends are doing these, wearing these clothes, and she's not getting attention because she wants to hold onto some values, then there's a, a great disappointment that they would have and a struggle that they would have in that way. So what this does in our culture is that we kind of worship the the beauty and women's bodies. And I put it that way because it almost like describes our culture, that we just put this beautiful model of a girl on a pedestal, and then it's almost as if we're worshiping that. And it's not even the girl, it's the body and the shape. And so there's actually a song that came out, and as soon as I heard that, I'm like, this is exactly what reflects that point of we're worshiping a shape, we're worshiping a body, and not respecting the girl. And um, it was that song that talks about, I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too, I'm in love with your body. And so it's Ed Sheeran, I think Ed Sheeran, however you say his name, but he singing about how he's in love with her body and the sh- in love with the shape of you. That those type of lyrics are reflective of that idea. It's like this: we're in love with a shape, and that's but what it does is create a culture of, that's how women make money now. That's how they find opportunities, and that reinforces that behavior in men and women, and them doing that. It's not limited to women because there's like a sexualized image of a man is the same thing. So it is becoming very much both ways. I'm just talking in general. So that's where I emphasize the attack on women. And this is probably going to be in my next podcast, but I just want to, all these topics kind of cross over each other. But that is the sexual thing in our culture that we have to deal with, is this incredible ocean and tsunamis and chaos. And we're we've probably symbolically feel like we're drowning and don't know where to find a something to stand on, and a foundation to work for, a way out. Or if we've hit rock bottom with our life, what's the options. Many people have considered suicide as an option, and maybe they have tried their faith in Jesus Christ and tried morals and just couldn't get there. And I want to emphasize that as you exercise that seed of faith in Jesus Christ, and that seed is a belief. If you exercise that belief that he'll do something, and sincerely, to the bottom of your heart, to the center of your soul, sincerely ask him with all of the energy of your heart, give him at least 24 hours to respond through a friend, through somebody who calls you out of the blue, through somebody you meet randomly as you're going about your day that you haven't seen in a while, or you stumble across a video on YouTube, or some kind of video that you normally wouldn't have clicked before, but you click on it, and for some reason there's the answer and comfort and strength you're looking for. Those are his responses, and he always responds to those sincere prayers with a comforting feeling. You could feel that comfort, and you could feel that strength, and to just wait upon it and look for those things that happen around you. And as soon as something stands out, and that moment, you could believe that it was him. And that little seed of faith is going to start to sprout. And then you're going to see other things that he's doing. You will be able to see that he's doing so much more in your life than you have ever thought that he was ever doing. So he will respond. Just be very aware after your sincere prayer, and you'll start to see these things happen. And then you'll start seeing your perspective will change about the world, and it'll open up an entirely new world that'll give you an incredibly new life. And you'll start eating up his scriptures, his words, and desiring his values, his standards, and seeing that he truly does want to lead you into greater happiness than you have ever imagined. And it takes a fight to try to change this, to change your life. But with him, you could do it. And it may take years, but at least start it, and rely and increases your faith in his grace as you continually change, repent, and get back on your feet after you fall. So I want to emphasize that, because so many people are falling. You don't have to resort to suicide. You don't have to resort to any of the other extreme measures to try to find an answer. You don't have to increase that desire for that faith in him to increase. So I want to tell you that he will respond and that it will increase. He has promised that. I have written another book. It was called 2020 Now, Seeing the Hand of God in Real Time. And what I have just expressed to you in the last few minutes about seeing his hand in your life, that's what the book is about. So if you want to start there and at least get some ideas, I know there are a lot of books written about this type of thing. You could just go straight to the scriptures. If you don't want to buy my book, I don't care. Just my book was just in a way of trying to help those that if they wanted to start somewhere, they'll know where to start, and to prepare their heart for that planting of the seed. And a lot of times it's just clearing out the weeds in your soul, and clearing out, making the soil soft, and starting to change your perception about God and who He is, and those that seed will start to grow, and it'll bring so much happiness. Even just that thought of that happening is it'll bring you hope. So we'll look forward to the next podcast. We'll talk about the attack on women in this world and how that manifests in different ways, and the destruction of womanhood, wifehood, femininity, and then also we'll talk about the attack on men and the great disappointment in the men, and the weakening men, demeaning masculinity, the appeal of fatherhood, the abused men that they feel they get their own attack and an own abuse situation, and we can go on and on about that. So we'll see you next time. If you're interested in my book, The Single Zombie Apocalypse, it is available on Amazon. It is a complete guide to the world of the unmarried, and it might give you some ideas. God bless. We'll see you on the next.